Imagine, it's the 9th century. You're preparing for battle, but all you have got is just longbows, slings, spears, and maces. Then, out of nowhere, boom! Gunpowder explodes onto the scene, and suddenly, everything you thought you knew about warfare is turned upside down. In this video, we'll walk you through how a medieval recipe created one of history's most explosive innovations. Hit subscribe and let's dive straight in. All right, let's talk basics. What even is this gunpowder stuff? Well, in simplest terms, it's a mix of 3 powders that create one explosive powder. Kind of like a musical trio coming together for a real banger of a song. The first member of this explosive band is sulfur. As the spice of the group, sulfur gets the pow pow party started by lowering the temperature needed for ignition. Without it, these powders would just sit around quietly simmering like my 3rd grade science project. Next up on instruments is charcoal. Now I know what you're thinking. Isn't charcoal for the barbecue? Well, this charcoal is strictly for fueling reaction. It provides the carbon energy needed to get the chemical reactions rocking. Finally, the powerhouse of the group, saltpeter, also known as potassium nitrate. This brings the oxygen to the show, ensuring proper combustion so the whole shindig doesn't flop. She's the life of the party. When mixed together in just the right amounts, about 75% potassium nitrate, 15% charcoal, and 10% sulfur, you've got yourself a proper powder keg. Individually, they're pretty tame, but together, their chemical magic creates some serious noise. Now, this mix might look like weird cookie dough, but trust me, you do not want the full taste test. Next, let's talk about how this explosive mix was accidentally discovered in ancient times. Talk about a blast from the past, and you certainly don't want to miss it. When you think of gunpowder, you might picture epic battles, fireworks, or even that one time you tried to make a homemade rocket and almost blew up your garage. Believe it or not, gunpowder has a history that's as explosive as its name suggests. While most of us learned about gunpowder in school as if it were a European invention, probably invented by some bored knight with a lot of free time, history has a few surprises in store. Thanks to the work of historian Joseph Needham, we now know that gunpowder's true origin story is as Chinese as a fortune cookie. So let's set the scene. It's the 10th century CE in China. Taoist alchemists are furiously mixing up their elixir of life, trying to find that secret potion for immortality. Spoiler alert, they didn't find eternal youth, but they did invent something that would make them a lot of enemies and friends down the line. Gunpowder was actually a byproduct of these ancient scientists' search for a magical potion that would cure all ills and make them immortal instead of a fountain of youth. They accidentally created what we now call the fire drug, commonly called gunpowder. And let's be honest, it's pretty impressive that they turned their quest for eternal life into the ultimate explosive. Imagine trying to invent something with no idea what you're doing. That was basically the process. Trial, error, and a lot of accidental fires. The Taoists weren't exactly having a quiet time of it. There are stories of whole houses going up in flames and alchemists suffering burns that could make a dragon wince. Their experiments were literally blowing up in their faces. By the 11th century CE, the Song dynasty had fine-tuned the recipe for gunpowder. No longer just a mysterious substance, it had now become a precise chemical concoction. The Song dynasty's recipe book might as well have come with a handle with care label. Along with sulfur, charcoal, and potassium nitrate, these early recipes included some interesting additions. Think dung for extra stinky smoke, or garlic and honey for, well, who knows? Maybe they thought it would make the powder taste better. And the fun didn't stop at recipe. The Song engineers were busy turning gunpowder into all sorts of weapons. Talk about getting bang for your buck, fire arrows, bombs, fire lances, rockets, and even the first guns and cannons were all part of their collection. They were basically the original pyrotechnic enthusiasts, but with fewer safety regulations and more dragons. Now, before you think the Chinese were all set to conquer the world with their new toys, there's a catch. These early weapons were pretty primitive. They didn't exactly win battles on their own. It wasn't until the 12th century CE that the Mongols got their hands on this newly discovered product. That's when gunpowder started spreading beyond China, starting off a global telephone that would make everyone rethink their idea of medieval warfare. Now let's talk about production. Early gunpowder was made by grinding the ingredients together for about 24 hours with a mortar and pestle. Sounds like a fun Saturday night, right? This process created a very fine powder known in medieval Europe as serpentine powder. It was so labor-intensive that you might need a nap just thinking about it. But it wasn't all rainbows and explosions. This powder had some serious flaws. It separated easily, was prone to humidity, and needed constant remixing. Fast forward to the 14th century, and now corning was born. This new process involved mixing the powder with liquids to create a paste. Think of it as a gunpowder's version of a makeover, rolled into balls to absorb less moisture and travel better. But of course, soldiers still had to grind these balls into powder before a battle. It's like preparing for a big presentation and finding out you forgot to print out your slides. By the 1800s, things had really evolved. Gunpowder was being pressed into molds to create uniform grains. Finally, the days of unpredictable burning were over. Now we had FG powder for big weapons and FFFFG for small arms and priming. It's like the difference between a fireworks show and a sparkler. So next time you light up a firecracker or marvel at the power of modern artillery, remember, it all started with some ancient alchemists who were really just trying to make a potion for immortality. Sometimes the search for eternal life leads to explosive discoveries, literally. Once gunpowder originated, it was like the new kid on the block who shows up with a flashy new gadget everyone wants to check out. Except this kid had a tendency to make things explode naturally. People had some strong reactions. To many, it seemed like the devil's own invention. It had all the right ingredients, a smoky, noisy mess that was surprisingly good at causing death and destruction. It was just like the ultimate do not touch sign for the medieval world. From military leaders and philosophers to common men and religious authorities, gunpowder faced a series of disapproval. It was denounced as an instrument of doom, and let's be honest, with the kind of chaos it could create, it wasn't hard to see why. Yet, despite these gloomy sentiments, gunpowder didn't exactly fade into obscurity. Quite the opposite. It spread faster than the very cutesy, very mindful, very demure meme. And while some criticisms of gunpowder might seem like they were aimed at the powder itself, it's worth considering that many objections were really about war in general. Take the Catholic Church, for example. It didn't try to ban gunpowder, but it did make Saint Barbara the patron saint of artillerymen. So while the church wasn't too keen on the whole boom part, it did appreciate the practicality of the new technology. In essence, the historical attitudes toward gunpowder were as explosive as the substance itself. There was a complex mix of awe, fear, and practical adoption. Gunpowder's spread wasn't just about technology. It was a reflection of humanity's ongoing love affair with progress, explosive or otherwise. Before the origin of gunpowder, weapons were basically big, heavy things that relied on human muscle. But once gunpowder came into play, it was like adding rocket fuel to the medieval arms race, literally and figuratively. Gunpowder basically transformed the battlefield. It wasn't just about heft anymore. It was about power and precision. Early gunpowder weapons, think cannons, muskets, and early rockets, redefined combat. No more were battles decided purely by brute strength and strategy. Now, the boom and bang of gunpowder played a huge role. By the end of the 19th century, black powder was starting to look a bit outdated. Having been replaced by more advanced propellants, the steam engines and internal combustion engines that powered the new age of technology had their roots in the same techniques that had been used to bore cannon barrels. But let's not forget the brain power behind it all. Gunpowder wasn't just a weapon, it was a bridge from the alchemist's lab to modern science. Its development marked the beginning of systematically harnessing energy in ways that were invisible but incredibly powerful. It burned with a rapid, bright flash, creating enough gas to send projectiles flying. Though its efficiency was limited compared to today's explosives, black powder paved the way for scientific advancements by showing that energy could be harnessed in ways beyond the physical senses. In short, gunpowder didn't just change how wars were fought, it sparked the tech boom that shaped our world. So next time you hear a bang or see fireworks, remember, it's a nod to how far we've come. Gunpowder, the invention that exploded onto the scene like a firework at a somber dinner party. It's the stuff of legends and nightmares, of glory and gore. But was it a burden or a blessing? On one hand, gunpowder was a double-edged sword. It made destruction easier than ever before. War became louder, more chaotic, and frankly, a lot more explosive. The battlefield turned into a giant, noisy mess of gunpowder and cannonballs, and the casualties stacked up as quickly as the smoke cleared. From the cannons that leveled castles to the muskets that reshaped armies, gunpowder certainly had a hand in some pretty grim chapters of history. Yet, for all its fiery mayhem, gunpowder was also a catalyst for progress. Imagine a world without it. No canals, no railways, and roads that are just glorified muddy trails. Gunpowder helped make the construction of these critical infrastructure elements cheaper and more efficient. It wasn't just about blowing things up. It was about building things up too. And let's talk tactics. The invention of firearms shifted military strategy in ways that led to the fall of feudalism and the rise of more egalitarian governance structures. Yes, it was messy and tragic, but it also paved the way for significant social and political changes. If we talk about trade and transportation, well, gunpowder had a hand in that too. Improved roads and new sea routes like the Suez Canal transformed trade and commerce, which, believe it or not, actually helped improve quality of life. Better sanitation, more efficient organization, and a boom in production and trade meant more people could live longer, healthier lives. So, was gunpowder a burden or a blessing? It's a bit like asking if a hammer is just for hitting nails or if it's also a tool for building. Sure, it came with its share of destructive fireworks, but it also laid the groundwork for a modern, interconnected world. In the end, the benefits seemed to outweigh the burdens, proving that sometimes even the most explosive inventions can lead to a brighter, more connected future. So what do you think? Did gunpowder blow up history or basically build it? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this explosive ride through the past, hit that subscribe button and check out our other videos for more stories that'll keep you hooked. See you in the next one, and as always, keep exploring and stay curious.